Welcome back, everyone. I'm Georgatos with Skanska, and it is my pleasure to introduce our final keynote speaker. We spent the first part of the program focusing on who we are, the second on why we've been successful and what we can expect from the commercial real estate standpoint. And now we're going to go focus on 5 global megatrends that will affect business in Williamson County. David Pickett is a partner of the assurance practice, has 27 years of experience in public accounting, serving clients in primarily the insurance and healthcare industries. David is a graduate of the University of Montevallo with a Bachelor's of Science in Accounting. He lives in Nashville with his wife and 2 children. David serves on the board of the United Way of Williamson County, American Heart Association, University of Montevallo Advisory Board, and Vanderbilt Masters of Accountancy Advisory Board. I'm honored to welcome to the stage Nashville office managing partner of PricewaterhouseCoopers, David Pickett.
That's pretty cool music for an accounting firm, isn't it? Good morning. I'm David Pickett, and I'm happy to be here this morning to talk about a few of the mega trends and how that'll affect business here in Nashville and Williamson County. But I'll tell you 2 things about this speech. One, I know I'm what stands between you and getting out of here. And number 2, I know that I wasn't the first choice to do the speech, as you can see by the advanced materials, but I take solace in that. I probably wasn't my wife's first choice either. And this summer, we'll celebrate 25 years together. So if she can hang out with me for 25 years, surely you can for 30 minutes. All right. So if I get all the technology right, this will be extremely impressive. But wanted to start out with 3 names. And if anybody knows these 3 names, you get the gold star. But George Rathman, Henry Singleton, and Mark Papa. And what did these individuals have in common? They each had stellar careers as CEOs at admired companies. And, you know, the first was at Amgen, Teledyne, and EOG Resources. Now, you know, they had stellar careers, and they were great leaders. They drove great stock price appreciation. They changed their respective industries, but history has pretty much forgotten them. Now, let's look at 3 more people, 3 more CEOs. And I'm thinking you know a little bit more about these people. You know, Henry Ford, obviously, Ford Motor Company, David Sarnoff, who's the father of television, and Walt Disney. And so what's the difference? The first group had highly successful businesses, but some would say that an even more expansive view of the world like these 3 had would have helped them be more household names. They imagined things. They changed history. They changed how we do things. Think about what Ford Motor Company did for mobility in this country. I mean, think the transformation that happened at that time. So you ask what's What's the difference for us in Nashville? I'd argue that we've got the same opportunity to be catalysts as these three gentlemen, to rally around, to rally around, the society's greatest needs, and in some cases define what those are, and then develop solutions to those. These opportunities present themselves in what I'm going to go over today, which is the megatrends. But before I do that, I'm going to introduce a person to you. Now, I think this is going to dovetail into the pajama group that they were speaking about earlier on the panel. But let me introduce you to Carolina. She's a 31-year-old software engineer who lives in downtown Nashville in the Gulch. She graduated from Vanderbilt University and honed her skills at Nissan. Carolina stepped out on her own as an independent contractor a few years ago, and now she picks and chooses her projects. She's sought after and works on cybersecurity projects around the world, from Bangalore to Helsinki to right here in Nashville. She earns more now, which gives her a lot of comfort, given the sizable student loan debt she has, over $100,000, and she's still paying that down. She lives on the road, so she doesn't want a big living space. Just 220 square feet does it for her. I don't know how that would do it for me, but it must do it for her. She loves her micro apartment in a green building that's made from renewable sources. It's also decked out in the latest Nest technology, which helps her be more energy efficient. She sends gifts home to Mexico to her extended family using a wallet app on her phone. And she just added the iPhone 6 Plus to her collection of devices, which now total 4. Carolina also believes in paying it forward in the broader world. She loves hearing about entrepreneurs that she's helped through Kiva. Who out there knows what Kiva is? Anybody? Oh, a good bit of people, but it's an organization that matches up people who want to lend money across the world to create more opportunity. They now have over $690 million deployed in loans across the country, across the world. She's also going to spend the next 6 weeks in a foreign country helping entrepreneurs start their business. So why open up with Carolina today? Well, and introduce you to her. Well, the reason is she's pretty much what the world is going to. She's living a lot of the mega trends. So as we go through those, it'll put it in a little more context as we talk about Carolina. Now, so what is a megatrend? Now, it's a long definition, but it basically means where the world is going. But a megatrend is a macroeconomic force that's shaping the world. They are backed by data and science, and they are quantifiable. But most of all, they are significant forces that have momentum, and hence they're societal. Because they are societal, those who dismiss them do it at their own peril. And what do I mean by that? You can lose your relevance if you don't embrace some of these mega trends and you don't engage. At PwC, we saw a few years ago all of our clients moving in the same direction. You know, whether they were in healthcare in Nashville, pharma in Europe, or financial services in Asia, we saw them, what their strategies were doing and how they did those. And what it led us to was 5 mega trends that we focus on. Accelerating urbanization, which the panel talked about a little bit today. Climate change and resource scarcity. And don't worry, I'm not going to get on a political bend about climate change. Demographic shifts, shift in global economic power, and technology. Now, how did we come up with these 5 megatrends? Well, what we did was we took 25 of our brightest people, and they went all over the world, and they interviewed large business leaders, small business leaders, government leaders, religious leaders, politicians, and they gathered information about these megatrends and where they were going and what they were focused on. So let's start with the first megatrend. Accelerating urbanization. For the first time ever, over 50% of the world's population lives in urban areas. Think about that, over 50%. Think about how many rural areas there are compared to urban areas, but over 50%. By 2025, the predictions are that that will be over 70%, and probably closer to 75%. Well, what does that mean? I mean, the predictions are there are going to be 22 mega cities with over, and a mega city is defined as any city with over 15 million people. Now, what does that also mean? I know we've had a couple of people in the construction industry up here, and they'll probably get excited about this. That means that there's going to be over $40 trillion spent in infrastructure. And that's in aging cities, replacing it, and in these new emerging cities as they come up to speed. There's 60,000 people added every day in the Chinese and Indian urban population, and about 1.5 million are added to the global urban population every week. So you can tell it's really accelerating. In China alone, there's going to be 300 to 400 million people will move to cities in the next 15 years. And that means that they will have to build the infrastructure in those 15 years equivalent to the United States. Think about that. There's where a lot of that 40 trillion is going to go. Now, how does this relate to Nashville? The area's current population is about 1.7 million, and is projected to grow by about 400,000, or it has grown about 400,000 since 2000. And there's significant growth projected. By 2020, we should be around 2 million people. And as we talked about the transportation issues and the 30,000 people a year that we're adding, this seems like a little higher than that. And how are we going to get all those people to their work and play? And also, I would say that as you look at the demographic shifts, you know, I think the Nashville population has grown by about 21%, the whole Nashville MSA. Think about this, though. The downtown population has quadrupled. So think about that as a trend as you're looking at this. And what are the implications? And I think the panel did a good job of talking about this as far as urbanization, and what you need to do is, as government and business leaders, you have the opportunity to collaborate and identify and develop the infrastructure needed to attract and retain the brightest minds, which is going to be a big deal in the next few years. And let me give you an example, maybe a real-life example of a company that's put their whole strategy behind this. I don't know if any of you follow Citigroup, but they have basically pulled out of everywhere except 150 cities across the world. And that's their focus. That's where they're putting all their investment dollars, that's where they're trying to hire talent, and that's where they see the growth opportunities. So it's interesting to see how in real life, you know, public companies, private companies, big companies, small companies are trying to adapt to this trend. The next mega trend is climate change and resource scarcity. And I said earlier I wasn't going to get on a political bent about this. I know there's some people who believe in climate change, some that don't. But what our focus more is on what the perception is out there and what the realities of what's going on with the money. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of government incentives for going green. There's a lot of customers that want green products. And even investors are looking at how green you are. And we talked a lot about buildings this morning, commercial developments, and think about, you know, you want them to be LEED certified, and I'm way out over my skis here, whether you're platinum, gold, or whatever, but that's important to people. So let's get a little more in detail. And when I talk about resource scarcity, think about this. If we just use the oil we're using today, and I know we've all benefited recently from gas prices going down, but there's only 50 years of proven oil reserves left. 20% of worldwide energy consumption, if we just did it a little better, could be saved through efficiency and energy-saving measures. Now, I know at my own home, if I could just get my daughter to cut off a light in the house, I would save maybe that 20%. You know, one of the exciting things, though, is here in Tennessee, we've got the Southeast first, and until I was preparing for this presentation, I did not know this. We have the Southeast regions, we're leading in renewable energy, and we have the first major wind farm located on Tennessee's Buffalo Mountain near Oliver Springs. This facility began as a 2-megawatt facility in 2000 and is now up to 29 megawatts in 2014. Also, the largest single solar installation, that's easy for me to say, in Chattanooga, along with the Volkswagen plant, produces 8 megawatts. We also had the first nuclear power plant in the 21st century. Now, we've got the Watts Bar plant that began in 1996, but we're going to have the Watts Bar 2 is scheduled to be the next U.S. reactor to come online. And it's supposed to come online in early 16 and is the first nuclear reactor to have the safety precautions or the Fukushima safety precautions. So that's exciting. And, you know, that's going to help Nashville and Middle Tennessee do is stay competitive through technological innovations, and it should help us reach our goals. And, you know, maybe another thing to bring this home, if you look at anything Coke produces, Coca-Cola Company, they talk about how they're trying to be a good steward of resources. Now, one of their biggest things they use is obviously water. So their goal is to increase Coke production by 20%, but use the same water they're using today. So think about that and how much that would save. Maybe our third mega trend is demographic shifts. And, you know, globally, we'll grow from approximately 7 billion people today to 8.3 billion by 2030 and 9 billion by 2050. Yet, the population is aging. It's not only a problem in the U.S., where we hear about it every day, but think of this. There are 60 countries that make up 40% of the world's population. And in the next few years, those countries are going to have more retired workers than active workers. Now, think about that and think about the implications on attracting talent, keeping talent, and what you've got to do, like let people wear pajamas, you know, to work. So, you know, this is a startling fact. You know, 85 of the world's richest people own as much wealth as 3.5 billion. Now, let that sink in. 85 people. Remember the number I gave you earlier about we have 7 billion people? So 85 people have more wealth than half the people in the world. So we've had things like the Arab Spring, you know, and we look at that, and that's over in Egypt and the Middle East. But we've also had things here in the U.S., Zagati Park, Ferguson. And we as leaders are going to have to deal with this somehow, some way. Now, I'm not standing up here saying I have all the answers, but we're going to have to deal with it. And we're going to have to deal with it like those 3 CEOs I mentioned earlier, Ford, Sarnoff, and Walt Disney. By 2020, the available full-time U.S. workforce will effectively decline 29%. Now, I don't know about you and your businesses, but in my business, I'm always out trying to attract top talent. And one of the things that I love about being here in Nashville, and I've been here for about 5 years now, is that I don't have to sell Nashville. I don't have to sell Williamson County. I've got more people that want to come here than I have jobs for in accounting. But it's a great position to be in. But think about this type of workforce and the competition, the salary increases, what you might have to do to attract that talent, even when you're in a great place. Think about those companies that aren't in a great place. That may be more for Matt to go out and get, as this keeps going. And we're already feeling the impacts of these trends, and it's significant. Also, look at the chart where, and it may be difficult to read, but freelancers. So think about Carolina again. She's sort of a freelancer. That was 7% of the workforce in '05. It's now 27% in '13 and projected to be 40% by 2020. Think about how your business model might have to change, how your HR function might have to change when you've got a more, what I might call a contingent workforce. It's a different way of doing things, and it's also a different mindset from the younger millennials of how they want to work, how they want to be rewarded, and what their work-life balance is like. Here in Nashville, we've been very fortunate because it is such a up-and-coming city. We've been able to attract, I call it STEM, but that stands for science, technology, engineering, math. And we've also been able to attract creatives with the music industry and everything else we have here. Nashville is the second fastest growing market for tech jobs in the country and the third most creative city in the country. Now, I didn't look up before I prepared this to see who the top two were, but I think later on it'll surprise you. Number one was in tech. But the most interesting thing about bringing scientists and artists together is there's a strong correlation between vibrant innovation ecosystems and large art and music scenes. For example, in Paris, which is, the art and fashion capital of the world by some, Xavier Niel is creating the largest incubator in the world and offering tuition-free scholarships to artists to study technology, to study computer science. Think about that and think about how out of the box that is. One thing we had to do as a profession, there was a shortage of accounting students at one point, and so we sort of did the same thing, getting history majors, political science majors, and putting them through a rigorous program after school, after college. And that's one of the things that locally Vanderbilt does here. So it's great that we have that here. They take non-traditional accounting students, put them through a master's program, and produce great students from doing that. So what does this mean here in Nashville? We've got to continue attracting talent and fostering an innovative culture. Now, one of the things I talked about in the demographic shifts was the aging population. Now, think about the opportunity we have here. One of the panelists talked earlier about how much money was coming into commercial building, other types of building and investment, but also a lot of money is coming into tech, especially medical devices, in and around Nashville. And with the great healthcare entities we have in Williamson County, Davidson County, and in Middle Tennessee, think about how they could work together in the future to take care of our elderly. Whether that's going to be robotics to help take care of our elderly, or how we're going to do it to become more cost effective, and two, give a better quality of life to people in their elderly years. Shift in global economic power. These slides always depress me, so bear with me. In 2050, the GDP of the emerging market 7 countries will be twice the size of the G7. What does this mean? It means global companies are investing heavily in the emerging markets. It also means the E7's newfound capital will be invested in other attractive markets, and this is a positive, including the U.S. Now, the E7 is China, India, Brazil, Mexico, Russia, Indonesia, and Turkey. So that's who the E7 is that we're comparing ourselves against. And you see this. Now, this is a disturbing trend. 3 times as many degrees are awarded in the E7 countries than the G7. So at a high level, you would say maybe we're falling behind a little bit in education, and how do we catch up? Now, there's a new group we define. It's called the F7, which is Nigeria, Philippines, Vietnam, Bangladesh, Colombia, Peru, and Morocco. Now, I know that might not be on the top of a lot of millennials' lists to move to, but with all the technology we have and the global mobility, they may be living here and working for companies over there. And they are the most dynamic economies and are expected to be 1/3 bigger in 5 years' time. So there's going to be some more development money going there. Now, this is a picture of Nashville's exports. As you can see, it was about $5.9 billion in 2013, and you can see our biggest trading partner was Canada. But we also have a little bit of a foothold in Mexico and China, which are two of the emerging markets, or the E7, and trying to capitalize on continuing those relationships and growing them, where at some point they might outpace Canada, would be a good outcome for the region. You know, what does that mean to us? You know, I think when the first person was up presenting and had the 10 or 15 list of things that she said attracts people or attracts companies, I mean, I think this dovetails with it. You got to have good regulation, but not over-regulation. You got to have the ability to attract foreign direct investment and human capital from wherever it is in the world, and capitalize on current export relationships, like I said, with China and Mexico. Now, we've talked a lot about the trends, and I think this last mega trend is more the answer than it is a trend. I think that technology is going to be the answer to a lot of those mega trends. I mean, think about the reduced workforce. I know we've gotten productivity gains year over year over year in the U.S., but think about how many more productivity gains you're going to have to make up for that declining workforce. So 90% of the data, this actually shocked me when our megatrends presentations first came out. 90% of the data that exists today was created in the last 2 years. I mean, think about how much more data we have. And I think about, when I flip to this next slide, I think about how my clients look at that. 0.5% of it is actually analyzed. Think about that. We're inundated with data, and I'm inundating you with more data today, but we're inundated with it, and I think sometimes we get tuned out to it. But the companies that figure out how to effectively mine their data and effectively use that are going to be the most successful. And I do expect this number to rise tremendously over the next 3 to 5 years. Here in Nashville, you know, we're ranked second for fastest growing tech jobs. And I am going to ask the audience a question. Who knows the city that's ranked number one? No, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Now, who would have thought that? Are they redoing beer in Milwaukee, or what are they doing? I mean, I can't figure that out, but they are. And we created 25% more tech jobs between December 13 and December 14. Nashville is second only to Milwaukee, like I said, and behind us are Hartford, Connecticut, Portland, Oregon, and Sacramento, California. So that's your top 5 there. Somebody mentioned the Google fiber coming to Nashville, and that's a fantastic thing, and I think that's going to continue to help us attract talent and people and businesses. You know, what are the implications of the technological breakthroughs? It's another opportunity for the public and private sector to collaborate. And I think the panel earlier did a good job of saying that at least in my experience, when you have that collaboration, you both have skin in the game, it allows you to do so much better in the public sector to get things accomplished like transportation and education. So what as we as business leaders can we do? And I look at it three ways: relevance, strategy, and purpose. You know, please don't lose sight of your relevancy. What does this mean? It means that a lot of stakeholders, whether Nashville residents or employees or the global investment community, care about you. Why? Because you have grown this. The government and business combined provide an innovative and highly desirable city to create growth and opportunity for everyone here and for others outside the region. And few cities can claim this. And second, on strategy, look at your strategy. I mean, are you being reactive to the megatrends or are you being proactive? Have you thought about these and how they're going to affect your business in the near term or the long term? How are you doing this? How do you go about talent attraction? Can you change that to be more productive? And then third, just purpose. And I think sometimes we go a little short on this. You know, our purpose is to increase market share or collect taxes. But your purpose ought to be more than that. And what we're seeing in studies of all sorts of the millennials is that they work harder for companies that they believe have a purpose in the world. So how do you step back and say what your purpose is as opposed to just growth or just growth in collections? You've got to look at it and have that purpose and promote it and tell people about it. Here's what we're trying to accomplish all over the world. Whether that's helping with global mobility, helping people in foreign countries who have the talents that you can use, you know, reducing income inequality, whatever your purpose is, and believe me, it can be dovetailed to also include profits. I mean, you think about this in resource scarcity when I go back to that. I bet everyone in here has some kind of green initiative at work. Now, some of them are more mature than others, but think about it, just a simple example. You know, your company probably went to putting your printer thing on, let's just print double-sided. Now, how much paper do you think that saved? How many trees do you think that saved? But what did it also do? It reduced costs. And if you look at most green initiatives, that's what they do. They look to add to the bottom line. Now, I'm not saying that there are not some companies who've done things green that may have cost them a little bit of money, but I would tell you 90% of the companies that I've dealt with on this issue, they are doing it, for one, for the good, but two, they're also looking for savings. And so I think that when you have that kind of win-win, you know, it's fantastic. And if you can do that in these other megatrends, think about how much better place the world would be. So I'd like to thank you all for your time and attention. Hope that wasn't too terrible. And you guys have a great rest of the day, and I'm going to turn it back over.
Thank you, David. Appreciate it. Thank you, David, so much. I appreciate that. You know, I think whether or not you're engaging in the freelance economy, which maybe you have no choice but to in some cases with some of your employees, or your companies that work on a global basis, you know that these trends affect exactly what you do. So I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us, David, about how these are going to affect businesses, large and small, across the country and across the world. So we started the conversation today about examining who we are as a community. We talked a little bit in the middle about what's got us here, what are the most important factors that allows Williamson County and Middle Tennessee to continue to grow. And I think most importantly for us as leaders in this room and in this community, it's where we're headed, because I think the biggest fear you've got in any community that's been as successful as Williamson County has been is that you get complacent. And I think one of the greatest things about the leadership in this county is that we aren't complacent. We're always looking ahead at how we can make this a better place for our kids and our grandkids. So, we talked a lot about jobs, right? So we asked this question on our survey a few months ago. Do you expect to hire additional staff over the next year? This was almost exactly similar to the response last year. Yes, in fact, 358 people responded and said, yes, they plan to hire additional staff over the next year. That's a great sign. And it really aligns well with the projections for future job growth out all the way to 2024, where we expect 25,000 additional jobs, not people, but additional jobs in Williamson County over the next several years. From an industry standpoint, this is really interesting. You heard a lot of this conversation earlier today, especially from the accounting side that David just finished up. So when we look at Williamson County's economy, where do we expect to add people in this economy? And we really expect professional, scientific, and technical services to be that top projection, far outpacing the other different sectors of the economy. And I will say, administrative support, food services, local government, social assistance, that's all pretty consistent across counties in America. But the two things that stand out that make this economy unique is, number one, that professional, scientific, and technical services, and also management of company enterprises. We know that we have 3 times the number of management positions in Williamson County as the average U.S. county. So if you go a little deeper in this number and you start to think about occupations inside these industries, it's exactly what David talked about. It's accountants, it's auditors, it's people involved in management analysts. Those are the kind of things that are going to help grow the Williamson economy in the future, which is great because this lines up very well with where we expect the growth to be nationally. So we feel really good about that. That just as a side note, these occupations are one that require at least an associate's degree or higher. This is an MPO forecast, so if you look even further out, half of Tennessee's population growth, the entire state, between now and 2040 is expected to occur in Middle Tennessee. Astounding. And sorry, Mom and Dad, who are from Chattanooga, Williamson and Rutherford County are on pace to actually pass Chattanooga and Hamilton County in terms of overall population. And Williamson County ranks number 1 in absolute population growth during that time frame between now and 2040. And as we kind of look in the archives, and have gone back to at least 1978. We've been the fastest growing county since at least 1978 in Tennessee, which is pretty extraordinary. We've had that great growth. So let's take this conversation all the way back to the beginning. When I talked about that study that was done by the Williamson County Chamber back 20 years ago and asked the question about housing. Affordable housing was ranked as the highest priority for most of the respondents back in 20 years ago, something we still struggle with today. You asked the same question this year, 42 of the respondents said that affordable housing was extremely or very important for their workforce. A lot of conversation about transportation. I don't think you can separate affordable housing from that conversation about transportation, as much as this county is expected to grow in the future. Another question from 20 years ago, a high level of support was indicated for local government being involved in some incentives to augment affordable housing. The city of Franklin has hosted a couple different housing summits over the last few months to have these kind of conversations. In fact, there was so much interest in it, the city actually hosted 2 different conversations about housing. 58% of the respondents said they'd like to see more affordable housing options for their employees in Williamson County. I think we all, or most can agree, it's important. It's the how we actually get there is when we need to come together and figure out how we address this long term in Williamson County and, quite frankly, throughout Middle Tennessee. When we talk about infrastructure, what got the most applause today, certainly understandable, is the fact that we know transportation has become a big challenge. Anybody who's been on the roads in the last few years know how much more difficult it is just to get anywhere. So when you asked the question 20 years ago, the members said they'd strongly support additional public funding for improvements of the county's infrastructure. You asked the same question today, roughly 58 of the respondents in Williamson County said they'd support raising taxes for transportation improvements or some kind of mass transit system. So you can see a big emphasis in understanding that this is something we've got to address if we're going to continue to grow in the right way. And again, no offense to Amy, that we don't become the next Atlanta, because I don't think anybody wants that. This actually was brought up, this is the shameless plug part of the conversation today, but this was actually brought up several times about Austin, Texas, being a city we look at that we know we compete against for jobs, which is exactly why later this year we're taking a group of chamber members to Austin, Texas and the surrounding area to learn how they've handled massive growth, how they deal with congestion, how they deal with education, and really take a deep dive in these issues to see if there's things we can take back for things that we can learn about. This trip actually is about half sold out, but if you're interested in going, please see Cindy or I after this point. And I will say too, if you're interested even not just going, but sponsoring the event, you can see how well we took care of our sponsor today with Skanska, and we appreciate your investment. We'd love to have that conversation with you as well. So, final slide before we leave. You know, I think there was so much conversation about all these topics today, and as a leadership organization inherently, which is what a Chamber of Commerce ought to be, we know how important leadership is to the future of this community. We operate a leadership Brentwood program. There's a great leadership Franklin program as well that complements each other. And we really put an emphasis on making sure that we get great leaders in positions of leadership to grow the county in the right way, and that we're all on the same page. Great leadership understands how important education is to this community. You heard from our panelist, Doug Brandon, earlier today about how important education is to Williamson County as we compete with communities across the country. And finally, the intangible of community, right? It's one of those things that's kind of hard to define, but everybody knows it. It's hard to quantify, but it's probably the most important thing we do. We have a great history and reputation of having people on the same page that put their interests aside and focus on what's best for this community. And that's something we never want to lose in Williamson County. And if you have these three ingredients, which are really fundamentals for us, that equals a strong economy, and that equals strong members. This room is full of people that are stewards of the Williamson County economy. And it's our job to build the habitat that allows you all to go out and take the risk to create prosperity for those that we care about. I want to thank David today for speaking. I appreciate that. I also want to thank all of today's presenters, Amy Gerber, Doug Brandon, Steve Kalinsky, Janet Miller. Thanks again to our presenting sponsor, Skanska. We appreciate that. And make sure you fill out the event survey, which will be emailed to you immediately following this event. Thanks for your investment in Williamson County, your investment in Middle Tennessee, and we'll see you guys next month in April. Thanks.